Welcome back to the second instalment of our latest Brew With Us project in collaboration with Burning Sky. In this episode, we head to Brighton and the significantly poignant Evening Star pub with Mark Tranter, founder of Burning Sky. We're going to be discussing the recipes that Mark has kindly shared with us and his advice on how to successfully brew beers in the style of Burning Sky at home.
Mark, cheers. Thanks very much for
Tim,
showing us around the brewery.
Thanks for coming down.
And for hosting us. So we're now here at the Evening Star in Brighton. Fabulous pub, amazing beer selection, like 10 cask lines. But this place has a bit of history for yourself. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about how you got started here?
I mean, I moved to Brighton in '95, I think. Well, I don't think I know, actually. And I'd moved off for my degree. I was doing some home brewing and did a few various bits and bobs, different jobs. I ended up chefing at a vegetarian pub down the road. And the guy who is the cellar manager here used to come in to the pub where I was working. I'd give him some free food, and I'd come up here and he'd give me some free beers. This is the pub I was coming to anyway, and it was the only, it was one of the only pubs that had back then. There's like loads of different beers, including Belgian beers in the fridge and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Very esoteric for the 1995, Somehow or other, I got offered a job. I think I'd given him some of my homebrew beer,
Okay.
and he'd then passed it on to the guy my friend Rob Jones, who put in this very small brewery in the cellar here. And one afternoon, Rob just offered me a job, and it went from there.
Was there a particular kind of beer or something that inspired you to start homebrewing or kind of like start doing the job here?
So what inspired me to start homebrewing was I was a student and I lived with some people and we liked to have a few drinks. And being students, we didn't have that much money. So the first beers that we would have made, probably the first beers I made for the first few years of my life were probably awful. Certainly the first were just from the kits you used to get from Wilco's or Boots or something like that. 40 pints that came out of a tin, and you added hot water to it and you let it ferment, and then you put it into a bottle, and a couple of weeks later you drank said bottle, and it was brown and it was vaguely fizzy, and it was like, it was beer of a sort, but it was like it was a gateway to doing something a bit later on.
So
Nothing that really inspired me per se. I mean, I grew up in the West Country and in England, so cask beer was part of the formative years, as was craft lager.
So it's kind of like a means to an end, kind of like...
It was, but it was like it was always from a sociable point of view.
Yeah, so spending some time with your friends while you were kind of brewing as well.
Exactly.
And then drinking the end results.
Yeah, it was like, and that is beer at its base. If you take out what makes it enjoyable is the sociable aspect. And some people like sociable making it, and some people are sociable drinking it, some people are both. But it's a very sociable drink, and that's what started it all.
So I have to confess, like, when I kind of reached out and said, like, would you spend some time with us and kind of talk to us about Burning Sky, and I was a massive fan. It's like, I'm a huge fan of what you guys produce. Absolutely stoked when you said yes. Why did you say yes to me?
I don't know really. Maybe no, I'm joking. It was almost like a challenge to me, and almost like a full circle as well. Because I started as a home brewer, I was given my first commercial job by someone who used to be a home brewer. And when I started brewing, there was no real information. What was available to home brewers was pretty awful, both in terms of equipment and ingredients. There was a few books that were of varying degrees of help, shall we say.
Yeah.
So when it came to maybe talk with you guys about the journey that we've been on at Burning Sky, and me to a sort of maybe greater or lesser extent, and how we can make beers that sort of replicate that. That's an intriguing proposition.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest, when I kind of reached out to you, it wasn't just as kind of a fanboy and the fact that I love what you guys produce. It's the fact that what you produce is so unique and different in the UK landscape of beer. For me to try and make that home, I've got this almost kind of little bit of fear and intrepidation. It's kind of like, how do I produce something as good as what, or almost as good, or on par, kind of like replicating kind of what you do. So that's kind of like why I kind of reached out. And
so I guess like with the mixed fermentation beers, it's just you have to throw caution to the wind and just be ready to accept failure or winning. As in most things. And when I started Burning Sky, I had absolutely no experience of barrel aging, mixed fermentation, anything. All I'd ever done was cask beer production.
you've never done any of that before you started Burning Sky?
No, we
And
didn't.
you decided to start a brewery that was kind of based around
Which is probably based around arrogance for some, or the fact that I wanted to try something and at least to have tried it, whether it worked or not. I mean, we weren't just going to make mixed fermentation beers, we were always going to make clean beers as well. But the mixed fermentation part of it was part of my, and for the people who work with us, learning and personal journeys.
Yeah.
So there's always this thing about artistry and personal development and making beers that are outside your comfort zone. And again, we said about earlier, there was no information when I started homebrewing. There's no set way of how. There's a lot more information about mixed fermentation beers now, but there's no sort of set way about how you make them. There is no how-to, because with clean beers, you can dictate to an extent. You have to be very careful with how you make beer. You can dictate how it reacts and develops, what the end product is. But with mixed fermentation beers, you basically, from our point of view, we're putting beer into a semi-porous container, so oxygen comes in and out, and we're working with yeast that you can't really control. So you're basically like a caretaker, and you can, as your experience grows, then you can certainly help learn how things react to an extent. There's always this sense of the unknown.
But what was it that kind of made you think about kind of doing that kind of Belgian farmhouse kind of style of beer? What inspired you to kind of go on that journey?
So again, just round the corner from here, there used to be a wonderful off-license called Trafalgar Wines, run by an absolute gentleman of a bloke called Steve. And I bought my first bottle of Orval from him in 1995. And I love the Belgian beers. Back then, I really, just great. That was really exciting. Beer that pushed the boundaries of what beer could be to your average sort of 20-something-year-old in whatever age we were living in. To a point when everyone was getting really excited about American craft beers, I was with my mate Eddie from Ramsgate Brewery, and we sort of share this love of the esoteric and what was just on our doorstep. We're talking just, Brussels is as far away as Manchester. It's not far. just need to take a little trip across the water.
Yeah.
It's not like a couple of thousand miles. It's like, and there's a shared history between the UK and breweries on the mainland. You know, how we made beer. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, and me and Eddie started going to Belgium quite a lot, and then both out of this rekindled enthusiasm for beers that changed our world. And from that, we went to La Chouve, Orval, lots, and then we became increasingly obsessed with Lambic and Gueuze, and from there started another journey.
As well as kind of showing us around the brewery this weekend and bringing us to this fabulous pub, you've also very kindly shared a couple of your recipes with us. First of all, let's talk about the Saison you've shared with us. What's the history of that beer and where did that come from?
So the Saison Houblon, which you'll be able to share with people, it's just like just wanted like a slightly stronger. We make quite a few Saisons that are like sub 5%. So I just want something that's a bit stronger and a bit hoppier, a bit in the European tradition, to showcase European hops, European malt bills, and the nuances you can get out of Saison strain of yeast. What makes a Saison for me is that, you know, I've been through the love when, you know, maybe 15 years ago of liking the more phenolic flavours. Now I like it to be clean and crisp, but with that underlying sort of Belgian character.
But not overpowering and hitting you around the face.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Rather than just getting a load of clove and whatever else. We use the same yeast strain that we've always used, but we've just changed how we let it work, and then that completely changes the flavour profile of the beer. Most of our Saisons, whether they be clean or mixed fermentation ones, are predominantly lager malt with varying degrees of wheat, spelt, maybe some occasionally a little bit of coloured malt in them. They'll usually use predominantly European hop varieties, sometimes with a little deft touch of American hop, just to elevate it slightly. And with our Saison strain, we've now run it in at around 20 to 22 degrees Celsius and let it free rise to a maximum of 24 degrees Celsius. Whereas before, you know, let it free rise, run it in at maybe 24, 25, and let it free rise up to 30 degrees, you know, which is the common knowledge of what the DuPont strain does. My palate's changed, everyone's palate changes and develops, and now I prefer a cleaner taste, you know, sort of still a very pronounced European Belgian flavour, but definitely less clove-like stuff
There's a bit
going
more
on.
subtleness to it then.
Yeah, and it allows all the other flavours to, well, from my point of view, it allows the other flavours to come through more. So, you know, the different grains, the different hops, you're not being bowled over by this, like, very accentuated yeast character. For people who enjoy lots of different styles of beers, you know, or people who enjoy making beers, you know, having things work in harmony more is better than having one thing that overtly dominates. Well, to my mind, anyway. I like the nuances of malt. I like the nuances of hops. Yeah, especially when we're talking about like making a Saison style, as opposed to like a IPA. When you're looking for very subtle, noble flavors. Yeah, as everyone knows, you know, your hops grown in temperate, the climates that we live in, well, certainly in Europe, the terroir of those produces less pungent flavors, you know, the same as with grapes. So it's nice to let those subtleties show through.
So as a home brewer,
Yeah.
other than that whole kind of controlling the yeast temperature, not let it have its free run, what other advice would you kind of add? What other kind of things give you that kind of beautiful kind of. I like the word you said, harmony. Makes that
Yeah.
saison that is in harmony with itself.
So I guess, for posterity's sake, the way I've always approached things, from my reading and my understanding and the gradual bit of knowledge that I may or may not have gained, I like using like a large portion of lager malt, and then
Cleanness.
for cleanness, usually use one. I'd advise people use ones that are highly modified. It just makes life easier.
Yeah.
I like using spelt because for historical reasons as much as anything. Because when I first started reading up about farmhouse ales in some
Everyone's.
keenness,
Yeah. Okay.
that was like precursors to wheat. Now we've been taken down a little thing about like landrace grains, so rather than like homogenous, agribusiness grain. That's an interesting thing as well. But I think it's really important to keep. You can add a bit of colour in there with some carapels or something if you want. I would just get some spelt, maybe some wheat, maybe some landrace if that's what you want. Just to add to that sort of nuanced biscuity flavour of the malt bill. For hops, we tend to use a mix of noble varieties with occasionally with a bit of a light touch of New World variety. And we'll often blend in, like, we might bitter with, say, East Kent Goldings.
Right.
We'll always use a first wort hopping. As soon as we start running the mash off and we've got the heating on, we'll add the bittering addition. And I was
Just
told,
at the one point you don't kind of then do throughout the kettle. The
and then we'll do some late additions.
Okay.
We usually hop about the last. If we stagger it, it will be maybe 10 minutes before the end of the boil, 5 minutes before the end of the boil, then liquor back, get it like 85 degrees Celsius, and add the lion's share.
So a big part of all of your beers is very much your yeast. So in these kind of like Saison style beers, what does your house yeast offer? What is the kind of like nuances that has made that your chosen yeast?
I mean, before I started Burning Sky, I made the base recipe for a beer we'll be discussing in a minute, and which is no real difference. At that point it was a clean beer, well, with a diastaticus yeast, so cleanish beer.
Yeah.
And I had 3 different yeast strains that I wanted to trial with it, and so I brewed one homebrew batch and then split it 3 ways, so 20 litres split, or 21 litres, to make it easy,
Into 3 demi-johns.
into 3 demi-johns, went to a different
Yeah.
yeast, and then chose the strain that exhibited the characters that I liked. Now, that strain's not really commercially available, and I'd kind of be loath to say what it is. But if people ask me after a few beers, I might tell them, or I might not. But what I like, I mean, I used to use the French Saison strain a lot from Thierry. I really like that, but it's super aggressive, and when I was approaching it, I don't know where it finishes in its final gravity. So in the knowledge that I was going to be making mixed fermentation beers as well, which will take that finishing gravity lower, I wanted something that would be flexible, not finish maybe quite so low.
Yeah.
So our house Saison strain finishes at about 0.5 Plato, so 1.002 Ballin.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much body you still have in a beer that's been made by a Saison strain. If you fermented like an ale strain and it finished there, the resulting beer tastes very thin, and aggressive with the alcohols and stuff. And I guess that's why I like our yeast, because it works well at different temperatures. So as my journey through making beers changed, once I was happily fermenting at 28 degrees, I'm now happy fermenting at 23 or 24 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as you get to know your yeast and you love your yeast, all this stuff. Your relationship with it grows and develops, and I fortunately chose something that has reacted well to the changes in my character.
So as well as sharing the Saison recipe rules, we're also sharing a beer that's pretty special to Burning Sky, which is the Saison.
Yeah.
And that kind of beer is kind of a beer on its own, but also very much part of a lot of other beers. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
It is, but it's only an extension of like where the journey of Saison started. Even when I was still at Darkstar, I sort of devoured Bill Markowski's book on farmhouse ales, and I was especially interested in the section of Van der Bats from De La Zen wrote. Now I'm not sure about how much of that is. Van, I'm lucky enough to call him a friend as well now. How much of it is true and how much of it, as with a lot of beer history. However, what's real and not doesn't really matter, because what inspires does matter. And so that I read this bit about when the best Saison, Saisons were mainly made by farmers to feed workers, but the best ones would supply their beer to the taverns and stuff. And often the landlords of taverns would blend them with lambic as well.
Okay.
So, wow, worlds collide. This is interesting. Here's two beer styles that I really like, and something that doesn't really exist, certainly not in the UK anyway. So I had this ludicrous idea, to make a mixed fermentation Saison that was oak-aged, with no experience of doing either. Which is like, I guess an interesting proposition, but that's how everyone starts. Everyone likes to do things they've never done before. So again, as with the Saison strain, what actually happened is the first batch of Provision.
Yeah.
We actually is the one we split between different homebrew things. Then the one I really liked, I was feeling a bit flamboyant, and having read this book, chucked a glug of Drie Fontaine the golden blend into it. And I thought, well, it's
glass of it or dregs or
no, just some of it, so I could drink it and see what the two taste, how the two work together, and how the sort of the sourness of lambic, Gers, would influence the Saison. And I just loved it. I thought, well, maybe this is something I could do on a bigger scale. So having done that, I selected different Brett and Lactobacillus strains that I was interested in, see how they worked, and then isolated them to put with our house Saison strain. And this was all done before Burning Sky actually first started brewing. And the resulting beer, Provision, people have been very kind about it for what it's given, what it is as a beer. But it's a very simple beer. It just needs a few things, like water, malt, yeast, hops, and thyme, and different yeast.
Okay, so those yeasts that you use for that, obviously we can't get hold of your house yeast, but what are the qualities that we should be looking for if we wanted to try and replicate that?
So I'd be looking for a Brettanomyces strain that's not particularly aggressive in terms of flavour profile. I'd be looking for a medium lactobacillus strain, as in something that's not super sour, but when you have all three together, they can exhibit almost like a zesty lemon-like flavour profile.
So that's working kind of in harmony with the hops, like you said earlier.
Yes, and when we started, I sort of used to pitch the Saison strain in first, let it do like maybe 75% of production, and then add, as in fermentation production, and then add the Brettanomyces and lactobacillus. Now we make life easier for ourselves and just put it all in at once.
It just all goes in at the same time.
So, we're inherently lazy by nature. But what that does do is when you've got like a Brettanomyces strain that is subtle, it gives it some easy sugars to grow with to start. Rather than the Saison strain, especially if people choose to use like French Saison strain, it's so aggressive that other things might not get a bit of a look in.
Yeah.
I'm not so worried with this one about what temperature we ferment at because the phenolics will pass. But I would probably suggest taking a similar approach, as in lower end of fermentation. When we make a beer, we start the production in stainless steel, and then at around 2 to 2.5 Plato, we will drop the temperature a bit, crop the yeast over 2 or 3 days, and then put it into oak barrels or oak foeder, and there it will stay until it's ready.
So as a homebrewer, it's like not everyone's going to have access to a foeder or a barrel. Obviously, can you think of any ways that as a homebrewer you could almost, is it kind of like, would it still also work if you just wanted to add some wood in there to kind of add the wood flavour? Or
Yeah,
is the wood
for sure. There's like, you can add spiral. You could just do it all in stainless steel. I'm not. I say stainless steel because we've done stuff just in stainless steel, so I can't comment on what it'd be like in anything else. So we've had excellent results, and some of the beers we age portions in stainless steel and portions in oak, and then blend them back together to get like a slight more cleanness from the stainless steel rather than the oakiness.
Well, I guess all that there is to say now is thank you so much for all of your time.
Thanks very much for
I
coming down.
can't express how much I've enjoyed this time with you. You've kind of broken down some barriers as well as showing me behind your doors of your brewery and kind of like showing me what goes on there. You kind of smashed some of those fears that I kind of built up in my own head of approaching brewing this style of beer on my own.
Yeah, the thing is, people can overcomplicate things, and when you strip everything down, the process is relatively simple. It's just having the confidence to do it in the knowledge that I've certainly failed on a few occasions, but you just carry on, because that is the thing. You read about these things and the people are absolutely great at it. So many people have had to destroy batches of beer, but if you want to make something like this, you have to be prepared that could possibly happen. I can fortunately say that it's in the lower echelons of the percentage. It's certainly in the one numbers. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, thank you again. Very, very appreciative of the time you've given us.
Cheers.
And hopefully, whatever James and I who's been kind of ushering us in behind the camera.
We look forward to trying it together.
Yeah, I'll send you a bottle if it's drinkable. Cheers.
This now draws the first leg of discovery for this exciting project to a close. In the next few weeks, join us again when we embark on our efforts to brew the recipes that pay tribute to the wonderful beer being produced at this exciting yet calm and humble brewery. Ensure you subscribe to our channel and have notifications turned on to keep up to date with this homebrewing adventure.